All right. Welcome back to another episode of the Behind the Back podcast. This is a 49ers week 1 post-game reaction. Guys, for Niners fans, we're here. We're back. It's week 1. Biggest thing, 49ers get the W 17-13 in Seattle in Lumen Field, where there were tons of Niners fans. That 53% that was originally reported, I don't know if it was up to that, but I will tell you, looking around in the stands, you saw a lot of red in that stadium. So absolutely electric atmosphere. An interesting game. We're gonna kind of break down most of that game and talk about what I liked and what I didn't like and things to kind of look, forward to as the season progresses. But overall, guys, I'm going to kick it off by saying you get the win against the division rival in a sloppy game where you played, overall as a team, probably like a C style game. And anytime you get that win against a division rival, it's a massive W. It's even bigger than, playing anybody else. So overall, really good. I'm really happy with this team. I like that, they were able to get this win. So in the first half, defense was doing a really good job in pressure and coverage. The Seahawks were targeting Upton Stout through the air. Upton, for the most part, was doing a good job. He was holding his own as best as he could. Defensive line was applying pressure, but hadn't quite gotten home to Sam Darnold. So you saw that front four in the rush that, Rob Saleh likes to bring in schemes around, and you saw it, really generating that pressure that you wanted to see. The linebacking core was doing a good enough job, but the problem was, especially early on, Fred Warner goes down with what I think is either a mouth injury or a nose injury. He had a bloody mouth at one point, and then he had some tape on his nose and some gauze in there. So I think we'll know a little bit more as that comes out tomorrow. He did end up finishing the entire game, but for a drive, he was sidelined for, I think, at least 4 or 5 plays before he was able to go back in the game. So, your linebackers, they held their own. I like what I saw from D. Winters, but you didn't have Nick Martin in this game. Nick Martin was one of the injuries going into this game that you knew you weren't going to be able to rely on. So that depth was concerning. As for the secondary, specifically, Upton Stout, like I said, he was getting targeted at that point. And there's not much you can do as a young player. If I was scheming against him, if I was the Seahawks, I would be picking on him as well. But in the first half, we saw some flashes of good play. We also saw him give up a big play. So it was a learning moment for him in that first half, but I liked what I saw. Defensively, I thought you were doing enough to not just keep yourself in the ball game, but give yourself a chance to win. Second thing I noticed in the first half was Purdy looked pretty good. He was playing confidently. He was slinging. The Ricky Pearsall connection was looking smooth, looking crisp. He had a rhythm with Kittle before he went down with an injury. We'll talk about that here in a few minutes. And, aside from that, he really only had a couple questionable throws in the first half. I thought Brock, in the first half, played a very smooth, precise game. And I felt like you needed to have that continuing throughout the rest of the game. The other thing was the ground game was pretty contained on both sides of the football. So defensively, snuffing the run. Zach Charbonnet had 9 carries for 34 yards. He was the only guy really generating anything on the ground for the Seattle Seahawks at that point. As for the offensive side for the 49ers, Christian McCaffrey saw 11 carries for 37 yards. Brian Robinson only got 2 carries in the first half. You saw early production from CMC, but still nothing breaking free on either side of the football on the ground. So it was an interesting first half because it wasn't super high scoring. It was a 13-10 ball game. It should have been 13-13, or it should have been 13-10 49ers, but Jake Moody misses a very easy, totally makeable field goal. And at this point, I've defended Jake a lot on this podcast, off this podcast. I think that, he's a really good guy. I think his head has been in the right spots. I don't know that he has what it takes to be an NFL kicker at this point. To consistently go out there and let your team down the way that Jake Moody does, not just in preseason, But in regular season form and in massive games where you need to have these field goals and you need to have these gimmies, he's continuously missing. And at this point, I kind of question, are you ever going to break the mental aspect of what's going on? So that was really frustrating. You missed the easy gimme that would have given you a lead going into halftime when you would get the ball back in the second half. But I digress. Ended the first half with a decent stop. While you gave up chunk yardage at the end of the Seahawks, you still got the stop and forced them to kick a field goal. So it's 13-10. Not the worst case scenario. You can absolutely come back in this at this point and win, especially the fact you get the ball back to start the second half. So the keys to the second half for me were you need to break a few plays, you need to get some big yards and gain some momentum. You need to try and keep the 12th man out of this equation as much as you can. This is still a loud stadium nonetheless. And additionally, you need to limit the penalties. At this point, there were 5 penalties in the first half on the 49ers. And you really can't have that if you're trying to continue to build drives and continue to build on what your, momentum you've got going. You can't have these penalties. And, one of them was like on Diamador Lenore, for instance, where it was an unsportsmanlike conduct at the end of a play. It just didn't need to happen. And I get it. Diamador, I talked about it last week. He hates the Seahawks. I love that. But you need to know when to stop and when to not take something past its limit. So little things, ticky-tack things, and all of them adding up to, these 5 penalties, which were drive breakers or momentum killers in a lot of ways. So you needed to limit those. Coming out of the half, Purdy throws a pick. It's an ugly pick that he shouldn't have thrown. In a perfect situation, this play, CMC isn't supposed to be chopped off, and he's supposed to occupy his space from like 10 yards from Purdy on his drop back. The interior linebacker would be forced at that point to stay low on CMC. But because CMC wasn't there, the linebacker was able to drop all the way back in coverage and cut off Juwan's route at the top. He threw the pick, and it sucked. You were able to get the stop after that, and then Jake's field goal gets blocked. This is 2 opportunities that you haven't taken advantage of, and you don't have points now. So you start to think this 49ers team has got to start going for it more on 4th down rather than taking a field goal opportunity, because you haven't to this point proved that you can even kick it through the uprights. Right after that, Sam Okwuonu forces a fumble, and Siegel jumped right on it. And this is something I'm going to come back to later when I'm giving some game balls and talking about some of these big moments. But Siegel jumping right on it was a huge play. You needed that. It was a momentum gainer. It was something that you absolutely needed in that moment. The Niners get a field goal out of it, so they tie up the ballgame. Renato Green makes a great play on Jackson Smith-Njigba, dislodging the ball out of Njigba's hands, and at that point, you get the ball back, you're rolling. Things are looking good. Well, Juwan Jennings, questionable to return with a shoulder injury, and I didn't even talk about it in the first half. George Kittle went down with a hamstring injury, was out the rest of the game, and didn't return. So you're minus 2 guys who you need to be able to rely on in the pass game, and you don't have those guys anymore. So then next drive happens. Purdy throws that terrible second pick. I'm not sure at all what he sees on that. It's one thing with the Juwan Jennings route. It's like perfect road. Linebacker isn't supposed to be there. On this one, Purdy has the time in the pocket. He has the space. It's a clean pocket. He has the time. Throws into triple coverage. I'm just kind of scratching my head at that point. I'm like, why would you think that is a better opportunity than the check down that you had? And I go back to, are you trying to make a bigger play based on the narrative around you being a check down merchant when you're not? We know you've already proved that. You can check it down a little bit here and there. I didn't understand it. And it was frustrating because you can't have that out of your franchise quarterback, especially twice. So defense does its job again. They get the stop on Seattle, and Seattle's forced to settle for a short field goal. So at this point, they take the lead. This is where this game really is decided, is the very next drive. Brock Purdy slings a deep ball after his second pick. He slings a deep ball to Ricky Pearsall for a massive completion down the field. Purdy then keeps a 3rd and 3 alive and throws a terrible ball to Jake Tonjes, who somehow comes down with it over Woolen, and that puts the Niners up by 4. That again was a questionable throw, but I can't say it was necessarily a bad throw because it ended in a touchdown, right? And that's what you need to have from your franchise quarterback. You need to be able to go down, lead a game-winning drive, and that was exactly what he did. And then you leave it to the defense to make the play, who's consistently been doing that for you throughout this game, and they did absolutely that. Nick Bosa makes an enormous play, stripping the ball from Darnold, and that ends the game. So, and that's after letting up some massive yards to Jackson Smith down the sideline that put him right into field goal position, and in an opportunity, obviously you don't need the field goal, but an opportunity to punch in 7, no problem. So big plays to win the game. I give this game for the 49ers, and I'm being aggressive, I think. And it might be because I'm just expecting a little bit more, but I give them a C on this. And I can't stress enough how important it was to get this win against Seattle. Seattle is a division rival. These first 5 weeks, you see the other, 2 division rivals here. You need to get those wins as well, but to get one of them, the first one against Seattle in Seattle, it's a massive win. But the style that this game went down in, it was an ugly game. It looked like a week 1. It almost looked like preseason in a lot of ways. You found a way to win in the sloppiness, but it was sloppy. So with no Kittle, no Jawan Jennings down the stretch, it ended up being, I can't say no problem, but it ended up working. Defense was the highlight in this game. It got timely stops even after momentum swings and missed field goals, interceptions. D-line, defensive line stepped up against the run. Longest scramble of the day was for 9 yards, and that was Darnold's little scramble that I think it was a drawn-up play. It was just to set the field goal at the end of the first half. So I love what I saw from the defensive line, because if you remember back to last year, Niners fans, this team struggled to stop the run, and that was so uncharacteristic of so many Niners teams that we've become accustomed to in the stopping the run game. It was, you just had no answer for it, and today the answer was absolutely what you needed to see out of this team. And, I'm looking at Zach Charbonnet. I'm looking at Kenneth Walker. Kenneth Walker absolutely hates the 49ers and specifically Diamador Lenore. Those two have a deep-rooted little battle between each other. But you held Zach Charbonnet to 47 yards on 12 carries. You held Kenneth Walker to 20 yards on 10 carries. So you found ways to limit the run, and on top of that, you did a great job in containing Sam Darnold. I didn't think that would be difficult going into this game. I talked about that with how I just don't, while I respect Sam Darnold for the player he is, I don't expect him to be the firework style quarterback and the guy who goes out and wins you these ball games like this. And, he had an opportunity at the end, but it didn't work out like that, right? So the 49ers able to limit the Seahawks to 230 total yards for the game was huge. And just the rushing defense of limiting them to 84 yards on the ground is something I can't stress enough. You limit them in the first downs category. You only allowed Seattle 14 while the 49ers had 24 of them. The third down efficiency is something I really want to highlight, and maybe something to keep an eye on for the Seattle team come the second matchup with them. They were 3 of 10 on third downs against the 49ers today. And that's not a good number. That's 30%. And you would hate to see that as a supporter, as a part of the team, as whatever, right? I think you can attribute a lot of that to the pressure that Sam Darnold was seeing from the defensive line. I think you can also say it has a lot to do with the secondary stepping up, and honestly just a lot of these young guys and unproven guys stepping into big roles in this game who were able to go out and make plays. And so I think ultimately defensively, while the Brock Purdy drive was what won the game, the defense limiting this team to 13 points. I don't think Seattle is going to be averaging 13 points a game this season. I think they're going to average upper end of close to like 20 points a game. So this was a really good game from our defense. I think it was absolutely one you needed when you're looking at how this team, is going to go about this season and how they're going to win football games. So I'm going to hand out some game balls here. And this was actually tough for me because I wanted to hand a game ball to a lot of these guys. And I really wanted to hand it to essentially every young player that we put out there today, because they really stepped up. And I while I'm not handing any of them a game ball, I do just want to kind of throw some names out there that really stepped up. Brian Robinson being running back 2, carrying nine times for 33 yards, and just being the perfect backup role for Christian McCaffrey. Christian McCaffrey did something today I haven't seen him do, and that's he asked to come off the field. And I think that's because he himself is learning that like his body can't keep up with the kind of style that he wants to play, and so he needs to take some of these off. And he knows Brian Robinson is absolutely a guy who can shoulder the load, and you saw that today. So loved what I saw from him. Ricky Pearsall, Jake Tonjes stepping up, Luke Farrell, and actually those I'm going to talk about a little bit more because they are getting game balls for me, and I'll talk about them here in a second. Marquez Siegel was awesome. I thought D. Winter stepped in beautifully in that linebacker position. Ronaldo Green had a couple really good plays. Sam Okuanu forcing the fumble. So a lot of these young guys, man, just stepping up and having really good games that I thought were absolutely needed. And it's on top of that, it's promising, right? Because it's something these guys need to go through. They need to play these tight games where there's a lot of pressure. Couldn't hear yourself in that stadium, both sides. It was a loud environment. They talked about it many times through the TV screen. So game balls, like I said, this one's going to go to the backup tight ends in Luke Farrell and Jake Tonjes. I thought both of those guys stepping up beautifully into a role they didn't necessarily expect to have in this game. With George Kittle going out early, it was concerning because George Kittle is a massive part of what the 49ers are looking to do on a game-by-game basis. And with the kind of production that we were getting from Luke Farrell and Jake Tonjes, it gives me hope going into week 2, especially against the New Orleans Saints, who are an entirely different story. We'll talk about them later this week. But knowing that you can rely on these guys, and Jake Tonjes coming down with that massive catch at the end of the game to seal it. I mean, stepping up in big moments, and that was, the third catch for him. His other 2 were timely. It was third down conversions where you needed to have those as well. So loved what I saw from those 2 guys stepping up into some massive shoes to fill. It gives me hope that, we have some really solid, really good depth at the linebacker position. My next game ball is going to Ricky Pearsall. Look, I talked about it with Marcos. The guy who needed to step up this week because of everything that's happened in the wide receiver room this offseason was going to be Ricky Pearsall. And Ricky Pearsall ending with 108 yards on 4 catches, and all of his catches were just timely. He had some really good double moves that separated himself. Separation was an issue for the 49ers last year with Debo and Brandon Ayuk, and early on in the season, and obviously before the injuries kicked in. But separation was the thing. You saw separation today, especially from Ricky Pearsall. And I thought that was very promising in a guy that, you expect when you drafted him, you expect him to be drafted into a major role at some point for your team. And I think we're starting to kind of see that with Ricky, and it's exciting to see it kind of, unfolding before our eyes. So massive game from Ricky, man. Keep up the good work. So third game ball, I can't stress enough how important this game was and how it was won by the defense. It really was. While the offense found its rhythm and were able to put points on the board and really move the ball pretty well today, the defense was the thing that kept us in this game throughout the entire thing. This defense stepped up and just made plays like the last drive didn't happen. And that kind of thing is something you need to have. That kind of thing is something that we missed a lot last year, especially while everything was going on. You had a lot of injuries in this game, so you had a lot of guys who don't normally get play time. You had rookies stepping into bigger roles than, otherwise might not have in other previous years for the 49ers. And I thought they stepped up extremely well. So I loved what I saw from Rob Saleh in the kind of schemes and the confusing sets that he was running and throwing at Sam Darnold. And I thought, overall this defense just stepped up extremely well. So the last thing I'm going to talk about, and it's ending on a little bit of a negative note, are the injuries. Obviously, George Kittle goes out with the hamstring injury. Jawan Jennings, I believe it was either late in the third or early in the fourth. It's reported that he's questionable to return, doesn't come back with a shoulder injury. So I know for sure George Kittle is getting a MRI tomorrow. I don't know about Jawan Jennings. I would assume he probably is. And so we'll know a little bit more about those injuries tomorrow or Tuesday. And so kind of get a gauge on that and see how we need to prepare for this game against the New Orleans Saints next Sunday. So overall, though, guys, while it was an ugly game, the 49ers were able to find a win, and it's something you build off of. And something I want to highlight again and lastly is how awesome it was to see the 49ers, whether forced or not, they were, leaning on their young players to make plays in this game. And to see that happen was extremely promising. Just to see the guys that you've drafted and the guys that you've picked up panning out the way you expect and want them to, it's important and it's fun to see. It's exciting. I think it's a building block. While it was ugly, it was good to get the win. We're going into week 2 on a win streak, so the vibes are up. Brock Purdy needs to settle in a little bit. He threw the ball 35 times tonight. I thought out of the 35 times, he really only had, I'll probably say like 6 bad throws. He had a pretty good game. It's just his decision making, and that could be a lot because I believe he saw close to the most amount of pressures he has yet in his career. I don't have those numbers. I'm curious, and I'll kind of dig into it. I might tweet it out. But guys, fun game. We're moving on to week 2 against the New Orleans Saints. Marcus and I will break that down next week. But as always, I've been Benny the Jet Retz. You can hit us up on any of our socials, which are down below. Chat with us. Tell me about the game. What were your takeaways? And if you're an Eagles fan and you're tuning in and you're laughing at this Niners team, just know we're coming. We're gonna get there someday, and hopefully it's this season. Maybe we'll meet up later. So as always, guys, we appreciate you. Hit us up on our socials. Like I said, like, follow, subscribe, all that jazz. You can hit us up at our email, behindthebackpod13@gmail.com. All right, guys. Appreciate y'all. Peace.